All right, welcome back to the No Effects Podcast. We are up to episode number 7. This time we are continuing our series of top 5s. We started with, a couple weeks ago, I guess maybe closer to a month ago now, episode before last, let's say. We started the series with our personal opinions of what the best 5 creatures are for each color, and then we also did 5 multicolor as well. That ended up being a pretty good discussion. I enjoyed it. I thought we narrowed it down pretty well. Obviously, there's a ton of other creatures out there and edge cases and things that may fit better in certain decks than others. But, generally speaking, these are cards you're going to see all the time at any table if those colors are at the table. So we're planning to continue this series. This one is going to be about the top 5 instants in each of those colors, and then an honorable 5 gold multicolor spells. So that's what we're going to cover today, and then in future episodes we are going to cover sorceries, artifacts, lands, etc. So keep an eye out for those. Normally right now we would jump into kind of talking about what we've been doing, but we just did a little preamble before we recorded and realized that all we've really been doing is brewing decks and playing Magic, so not a whole lot to share. Basically getting prepped for my next stream, which will be on the 20-somethingth,
29th, I think?
29th? Yeah, sure.
Something.
One of those days, we are going to be doing a full mom cEDH pod, so we've basically been brewing lists for that. I've made 4, Kirk's made 3, or other people have made a few, so there should be a good amount of new decks, new spice for you to check out at that point. But because that's really all we've been doing, we wanted to do something a little different this time. We did end up getting some feedback on our last episode, which was the March of the Machines set review, and we just wanted to touch on that. So, Kirk, you want to read off the comment? What was his name?
It was from a commenter named Justin. And they said, apart from the great video guys, which, hey, we appreciate that. Thank you. They said the dance with Calamity doesn't shuffle after each exile because the shuffle ability is 1 sentence. So that was something that we had just misread and misunderstood when we were reading that card and evaluating it from the mom set. The other piece of it they put, I asked the question for my Kroxa and Kunaros build that I'm working on, Karmic Guide and Abdel Adrian, or Angel of Glory's Rise and whatever little human that exiles it is. I can't even remember his name right now. And they put,
wasn't it?
No, the 1/3 that ETBs and exiles the angel, then you can sack it and loop it, all that stuff. Fiend Hunter or something like that. Anywho, they had put that their preference would be Karmic Guide between the two, because you could also add a Kiki Jiki and Felidar Guardian to have another combo line after you mill your deck with the Altar of Dementia. You could return Karmic Guide on last trigger, return Kiki. Do kind of like the similar pod lines where you copy the Kiki, or you copy the Karma Guide with Kiki to return Felidar Guardian to then blink the Kiki Jiki, then boom, you have the Kiki Jiki Felidar Guardian line. In case you're playing like a Get Rog player or something, that if you try and mill them out and they have a Shuffle Titan, hey, here's another avenue to win right away. So, Justin, appreciate the comment, man. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And again, anytime you guys have comments, you can leave them there in the YouTube. You can also leave commentary on our Spotify page. I've had a question posted on each and every episode there. It was just, did you have any thoughts or something to that effect, and haven't had any responses. So if you hear something while you're driving to work and you have the time, shoot us a little text, and we'll discuss anything that you have to bring up on future episodes. So
heck yeah.
With that said, we're ready to get into the main bulk of the show. So again, we're going to be doing this in Wooburg order, as is tradition. So white, blue, black, red, green, and then gold. We already went through our picks as we picked these individually, and then compared notes prior to doing the show here. So we already know which ones we agreed on, and actually we did pretty good as far as knowing each other's picks, because there aren't too many where we are in disagreement. And I don't even know that we're in disagreement. It's more of just trying to get down to 5 rather than, going over. So in each category, we got 1 to 2 where we didn't necessarily pick the same thing, and we will have that disagreement or debate at the end of each section before moving on to the next. With that said, also disclaimer, This is just our opinion. These are not necessarily the top 5 best cards in each color. They're not necessarily the top 5 that you would pick, etc., etc. Don't flame us to death. These are just cards that we know see play and that we know are good.
Yep. Extremely powerful. And again, they're not in a particular, this is number 1 through 5. These are just 5 in no particular order of power level. So don't get your, socks in a bunch if we say this one's 1, this one's 2, this one's 3. We're not saying that's number 1 most powerful, etc. So
right. The power level and all that aside, these are obviously for cEDH, but some cards are better than others in different scenarios even. So starting off, we're on white. So the number 1 pick I have here is Silence. Silence is a 1 mana white instant that says your opponents can't play non-creature spells. I think it just says spells at this point. Man, I should pull these cards up.
Yeah, it's just your opponents can't cast spells, I believe.
So they can still activate artifacts. They can still activate creature abilities, but they cannot cast spells. So generally speaking, that means that you can go about your business uninterrupted and unimpeded. Usually you cast this at the beginning of a turn that you want to try and win so that no one else can do anything during your turn, and you just do your combo and get there and all's good. But can also be used offensively in the sense that if someone else, because maybe somebody get probed them, or however you came about the information, it came to the point where you're like, okay, this guy's gonna win on his turn, so on his upkeep, before he even draws, you cast Silence, and he can no longer go for his win. You could also do it at different points during people's turns to stop something. Maybe it didn't look like they were going for a win, but then they are, so you stop them mid-combo, etc. So
it's fun to follow up when somebody casts Jessica's Will targeting somebody and you respond with Silence. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it'll shut that down. It'll shut down, they go to tutor, and you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to silence you so that whatever you tutor for, you can't cast. Maybe that was the other piece they needed for their combo. Yada yada. So definitely a lot of options that you can do here, but is it the absolute best white card? Maybe not, but it definitely does something very powerful. And as we discussed the last time with creatures, the Grand Abolisher and the Ranger Captain of Eos effects, Myrel, etc., they're all very on par and very similar in power level. They just have their pros and cons as far as costs and, comes with the body, doesn't, etc. But Silence still sees play in even 5-color decks too, which is notable.
Yep, and this one, along with all of those, the Grand Abolisher effects, etc., got considerably worse with the printing of the Boseijus and Odawara and even the twin shot sniper goblin, whatever that is. So
any of the channel cards, they have a way to get around these effects. So next one is Enlightened Tutor. This is also one that I would say pretty much sees play in 5-color decks all the way down to mono white because it just does the thing and it does it well. It's a 1-mana tutor that says search your library for an enchantment or an artifact, put it on top of your library, shuffle, done. So you usually do this at end step, right before your turn. You go get your mana crypt if it's early turn because you just need that mana boost. You go get a stacks piece if you need that. You go get some other enchantment you may need. Maybe it's Heliod so that you can win the game with the ballista that's in your hand. Whatever the case is, it is the most efficient way to tutor enchantments. There are other ways, but it is the most efficient. And then artifacts, it's tied with some of the blue stuff that can do the same thing, but most of those are limited, whereas this will get you anything, and I think that's what makes it the most powerful tutor for these in the game.
For sure. I mean, the fact that it finds Underworld Breach too is pretty huge for our format of cEDH. So yeah, this one definitely an all-star in everything from mono white on up to 5, like you said.
Yep. Not a lot else to say about that. Next up is arguably the most powerful creature removal spell in the game. It's Swords to Plowshares. People will argue for perhaps other ones that are similar, but the reason that most cEDH players in general like this one the best is because it's 1 mana, it's exile instead of destroy, and the downside is that whatever creature that got exiled, their controller gains life equal to its power. So if you do exile something that's like an 8/8, they are gaining 8 life, but generally people don't mind giving 8 life unless it's to an Adnaz list, so most decks aren't using their life total that much except for to try and stay alive. So in that regard, it is the best cheapest way to remove a problematic creature with minimal downside.
Yeah, nothing much to say about it. It's been around since forever, and it still sees play today.
Yeah, and it, again, is another card that will see play in 5-color decks. And I think that's notable in all of these, and I probably will say this over and over again throughout the episode, but if it's a card that sees play in all 5 colors, then that means it's really good. If it's something that only sees play in mono white, probably didn't make this list. Next one is another pretty good piece of removal. It's March of Otherworldly Light.
It's a 1 white and X instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of white cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 colorless less to cast for each card exiled this way. Exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value X or less.
So it is multifaceted removal. It is exile, right? You said exile.
Exile, okay, you bet.
So exiling, that is one nice thing about white, is a lot of times it is exile, not just destroy. So it can also hit a creature, but then it could hit other problematic pieces, which is one of white's, not like limitations, but it doesn't have a lot of good removal for like artifacts and enchantments. It does. It has disenchant and things like that, but as far as like ones that are modal like this, it doesn't really have outside of, you know, the disenchant, really. But that can't hit a creature, so this is kind of like taking that an extra step further. It also has that clause of, so you could pay 1 white and an X to just tap a land to get that extra mana and just remove 1 CMC thing. Or let's say you pay that 1 mana and then you exile a white card from your hand. Now you can hit a 3 CMC, and then so on and so forth. So as much, it's 1 mana, or X equals 1 for lands and equals 2 for cards discarded, or exiled. So it's kind of on the lines of like, you know, Force of Vigor, where you have to pitch some cards to do the thing on somebody's turn for free. In this case, it's just pitch to make the value go up. So in that regard, it's essentially you have to hold up 1 mana like you would for swords, but then you have the option to pitch stuff out of your hand that they don't know about, so you can get rid of bigger threats without having to give away the information that you can do that.
Yep. Just being super versatile, being able to, for a lot of decks, if they're wanting to remove a Grafdigger's Cage, or, you know, an opposition agent, or an Underworld Breach, this catches all, which is kind of nice. One thing that a lot of people don't think about, it's you can, for 1 white mana, exile somebody's Mana Crypt. If you're, you know, if they're just going ham on their first turn and you're like, I need to slow this down, pop their Mana Crypt for 1 white mana. So, and the exile, like you said, is huge. Getting rid of, you know, if somebody throws out their Dockside or their Lion's Eye Diamond, exile that beast and they see if their plan crumbles. So, yeah.
So those are the 4 that we agreed on. When it came to 5th, I picked Reprieve. Now, this is a card that's not even legal yet, but we have seen the spoiler. It's coming out in the Lord of the Rings set, and it's basically the white version of the blue card, Remand, which is, in that case, 1 and a blue, but in this case, 1 and a white, instant, and return target spell to owner's hand. And then, doesn't it say draw card?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So it's a pseudo counterspell that replaces itself. In that regard, we have some counterspells, but the only couple that really see play, like Mana Tithe sometimes, which is 1 mana, it counters a spell unless they pay 1, not very powerful. Then also there's that Memory Lapse one. It's like 2 and a white, and it puts the card back on top of their library, which is fine, but it basically just sets them back a turn. And in this case, it also just puts it back in their hand for them to recast, but you're using this more often than not because you're going to stop them from doing the thing that they're trying to do, because they can't, you know, recast the spell, or they're trying to stop you put it back in their hand, they can't recast, etc. So it is limited in the sense that it's still not just a straight up counter spell, but I like the fact that it replaced itself. And in Boros, I mean, you're not really, I guess Boros has got pyros and things, but in, say, Azorius has got counter spells. Okay, well, in Selesnya, like, it's great. Whatever the case, I think any other piece of stack interaction for white is good because they don't have a ton.
Notably, too, Remand, which what we're comparing it to in blue, says counter target spell. If it's countered, put it back in its owner's hand instead of its graveyard, instead of their graveyard. This one doesn't counter the spell. It just returns the spell to its owner's hand, so it can get around things that say they're uncounterable. This doesn't counter it. Similar, like, what's the 4-drop one? If they've cast 3 spells, it's free. 2 blue and 2 1 that exiles spells on the stack. It doesn't counter anything.
Mind Break Trap.
Yeah, so it's kind of a similar thing to that. This one gets around the uncounterable clause because you're not countering the spell. You're just putting the spell back in their hand. I don't know what that's notable against, but I'm sure it'll. If somebody casts something with Cavern of Souls, boom, you can still bounce this to their hand. You know
that gets around Abrupt Decay. It gets around Dovitudo. Gets around Allosaurus Shepherd, I guess.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, Destiny Spinner. There's another one. Yeah, absolutely. So it's notable for that as well.
Hullbreaker Horror can't be countered. Yeah. That puts it back in its hand. Yeah, you know.
Get that thing out of here. Anyway.
Right. So which one did you pick for this slot?
I picked Path to Exile. So it's very similar to Swords to Plowshares. 1 white mana instant, exile target creature. That creature's controller can search their library for a basic land card, put it into play tapped. The reason I picked this one is piggybacking off of the fact that Swords to Plowshares is so powerful. 1 white mana exile is great, and there are a lot of cEDH decks that play 0 basics. So sometimes this is just 1 white mana, nerf their creature forever and give them no value.
As I mentioned with Swords, I think it was shown to have value or more value because it gave life, and this one was lower on the list because it gave a land, and people didn't like the thought of ramping someone to removing a creature and then them getting something in return like that, because it's basically a permanent for a permanent. And I guess in that then you're 2-for-1-ing, sort of. But like at the same time, like you said, I think when that was played, or when that argument was happening, there was less people with greedy mana bases, to the point where, yeah, like there are, and that's why a lot of people will run 1 land is for like Assassin's Trophy. This is kind of the same thing. If you run 1 basic, you at least always have a basic for that inevitability. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I only didn't put it on here because it's in the same boat as Swords and March, really. They're kind of all 3 very similar in their pros and cons. I just didn't think we needed another one, so I went Reprieve because it's different. But that's not to say that it's better. I think in both cases they're both good. I don't really know which one. It's a difficult pick for sure.
It's definitely close. The reason I'm not as high on Reprieve as I am on Path to Exile, and believe me, I will be playing Reprieve in decks, is I can't think of a single deck I play Remand in right now.
Well, right, but that was my thought, was that it's in a mono white or like a Selesnya or
yeah, absolutely. For those colors,
even in Boros, I think it's fine. In Azurius, probably not, because you're running blue counterspell, so you don't need it.
Sure.
So and it's not going to be seen. I guess going off what we've already gone off of, Path to Exile is more likely to be seen in higher color decks than Reprieve would be. So in that case, we probably put Path on here. Also, Reprieve isn't strictly legal yet, so we're just gonna say Path to Exile.
As I say, the other argument I would make really quick is Reprieve being a white remand, more or less, as we discussed, we'll see play in Sans blue decks. Path to Exile, if that card was not white, if it was black, green, blue, or red, it would see play.
Yeah, for sure. Because a lot of those colors don't have a 1 mana just kill whatever. Because it doesn't have limitations. Black has 1 mana kill non-black, or non-black non-artifact, or non-thing, or
there are 5 total power toughness,
or you can kill non-merfolk, vampire, zombie, blah blah blah, whatever that one is. So yeah, right. They have some wild limitations on their stuff, and green just doesn't have that. It's got fight spells, and blue doesn't have it either. It's got bounce spells. Well, I guess they have
3/3.
Yeah, 4/4. Yeah,
or you give them the monkey or the lizard hydra thing, or lizard, whatever the heck that is.
Yeah, Pongify and Rapid, or then they have Resculpt, which is probably the best out of those. But
love that card.
Okay, so moving on to blue. Take it away.
All right, for blue, the 4 that Islaine and I agreed upon: Fierce Guardianship, 1 blue and 2 colorless, counter target non-creature spell. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good God. Oh, that's right. Okay. Brain fart. Don't mind me, everybody. 1 blue and 2, counter target non-creature spell. If you control your commander, you may cast it for free from your hand, not from your graveyard, you breach players. Anyway. Super powerful card. Any deck that can and will reliably play its commander, have it on the battlefield, and is in blue, is playing Fierce Guardianship. I don't think there's an exception to that. I could be very surprised. Commenters, let me know if I'm missing something.
The only place I can see where you don't really play this is like Anala, because you just never cast Anala.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Right.
if you play a blue commander
an
that
Eminence deck that has blue,
Yeah.
you're not worried. But
or if your plan is looping your commander by sacking it and all this kind of stuff, where your commander's not going to be on the battlefield when you need this to happen, yeah, you might not play this. If it's something where I'm playing my commander, I'm hoping it sticks, whether it's the engine, the value, whatever, this gets played if you're playing blue. Period.
yeah, it's definitely a staple and has been since it came out. I mean, it's what sold the precon that it came with.
Absolutely.
Same that Dockside and some of the other ones did. And honestly, it's not hard to cast by itself. Like, just hard cast it. Yes, you don't want to be holding up 3 mana, but there are times where you haven't gotten your commander out. There's 3 mana on your board, and you just cast it. I've seen it done play. I mean, I see people hard cast Force of Will. It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they did 1 blue pip and 2 colorless instead of 2 blue pip and 1,
and it
was
is
way better.
It is just counter and not like if they pay. So
Yeah, hard counters are always good.
The only thing that makes it arguably bad is that it is non-creature only. It's not just counter target spell, so you can't hit creatures with it. But 90% of the time, you're using this to protect your own win, or you're using it to stop somebody's win, and it's a gotcha moment.
Absolutely, it's one of those. It's no longer the 2 blue mana untapped. 2 islands untapped is the boogeyman. Now it's, do they have cards in the hand and a commander in the battlefield is the boogeyman. So
Yep.
crazy how that happens. And like you said, it doesn't counter creatures, and creatures are definitely getting better. So we'll see if it continues to be powerful. But I think this one will see play for many, 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 many years to come.
Yeah, I don't see it being replaced because every other free counter just gets played on top of, not in lieu of.
Yeah, concur. Cool. Next up on our list, we have Mystical Tutor, 1 blue instant, similar to Enlightened Tutor. This one searches for an instant or sorcery, reveals it, puts it on top of your library after you shuffle. I mean, what more is there to say? You can dig up combo pieces. I very, very, very rarely ever use this to tutor up interaction, unless the interaction is something that I'm needing to remove the piece on the board that's stopping me from doing the combo that I already have in hand. But yeah, this one, super powerful. Tutors in blue. What more do you need?
So I didn't mention it with the Enlightened Tutor. You do have to reveal it. So in the same case here where you have to reveal it, it can be a weakness as far as you don't really want to go get removal with this, because then everybody knows you have it. When you go get your Cyclonic Rift or you go get a counterspell with this card, people just go, well, shit, now we know. And they're less likely to play into your gotcha moment. But sometimes you have to. I've definitely gone and gotten a Cyclonic Rift with it, and it was just like, I don't care if you know that I have this because I'm going to fucking cast it. And then you just hope that you have backup or they have nothing for it. Same goes with if you're going to get any sort of answer or any sort of combo piece or anything like that. A lot of times this just goes and gets another tutor, that like a demonic tutor, so that you can actually tutor for something and then you don't give the information away. But either way, it is part of that same cycle, and it is gonna be the type of thing that you're gonna see all the time regardless, because it is a versatile tutor. It does have that drawback of going on the top, but in blue decks a lot of times you're just drawing it right away, or you play it on your upkeep and then you just draw it right away too.
Yeah, and especially in a format with Rhystic Studies and Mystic Remoras, they cast something, you respond to the casting with this, then trigger your Remora or your Study and draw. Yeah, it's goofy. Great card. It'll definitely see play for a long time, and you'll notice a running theme throughout this list as we go through these particular tutors. Anyway, going on to the next one, you mentioned it, Cyclonic Rift. 1 blue and 1, bounce target permanent and opponent controls. I think is the exact. I don't remember the exact verbiage, but that's what it does.
Sure, it's opponent. Yeah,
it's opponent only. I'm 100% saddened and sure of it. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, and then 6 and a blue, you can overload it. It's an amazing blue wrath essentially for the whole board. Granted, it doesn't kill everything; it puts it all back in their hand, but it's an instant. It can be played for 2 or for 7, so it's super modal in that instance. Great card.
It's also removal in a sense because most of the time people are picking up more shit than their hand size, and they're not able to get back down to hand size before passing. So a lot of times they end up dumping stuff that they had on the field before. Also, a lot of times it just ends the game because you've wiped out all of the things that were in your way. Stacks pieces that are stopping you from combo, blockers that are stopping you from killing people, etc. So most of the time this is just getting rid of everybody's stuff so that you can go and win. If it's not, it's because you're so far behind, you're just trying to catch up.
Yep, and there are times where you'll jam this overloaded. Everybody will pick up all their stuff. They'll spend their entire turns, the next 3 pursuing turns, building their battlefield back, leaving you the wide open spot to go off while they're all tapped out because they had to recast all their mana dorks or mana rocks. So, super powerful card.
Yeah, also arguably one of the best wraths in the game.
Yeah, and being a 2-drop, it doesn't get hit by Mental Misstep, which is one we definitely considered for this list, but I don't think it made it. We'll see. Spoiler alerts. But being a 2-drop, yeah, you can muddle the mixture to tutor it up too. So it's just great. It's a good card.
Indeed.
Moving on, Force of Will, and it's again a reminder to everyone before they go crazy. These are in no particular order, so don't get in a bunch. 2 blue and 3 mana. Counter target spell. You may pay 1 life and exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay its mana cost. Free counter magic for anything with the low cost of exiling a blue card and paying a life.
It is pretty much the best counter spell in the game when it comes to availability and freeness, and not having a huge downside. The major downside is that when it's in your hand and you don't have another blue card, you can't use it unless you pay 5. But we've both seen that happen countless times. Sometimes you just have the mana, sometimes you don't have the other card, sometimes you're forced to just pay the 5 and deal with it. Still, it can hit anything, so somebody casts, a big Eldrazi you don't want to deal with, you got an answer, or they're casting their huge Atraxa or their Kunaros or whoever, big creature that's going to win them the game because it's a combo piece, or any of their combo pieces, any of their interaction, yada yada. So it literally does everything you want it to do for the low cost of a mana and pitching a card. Most blue decks have enough cards that they're willing to pitch, so...
Yep, the other big thing to it, besides the exile a card, pay a life clause, the only other downside to it in all reality that I can think of, it's decks that play Adnaz that flip this, they're losing 5 life, which hurts a little bit, but they're willing to take that risk to be able to have a super powerful counterspell to protect their Adnaz if they have it in hand, or to get there after they do Adnaz successfully. So, super powerful. I play it
in all of my Adnaz lists.
Same.
If they're blue, so yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
It's worth having.
Absolutely. And I guess the upside to that is if you're playing a Yuriko and you flip it off the top, it's 5 damage. So
it is very good there. Yes.
Yep. Heck yeah. Going on to the last spot. So number 5, this is where Lane and I had a little disagreement, and we'll see what you guys think. I put Pact of Negation. 0 mana, counterspell, counters anything. The downside is during your next upkeep, I believe you have to pay 2 blue and 3, or you lose the game.
Yeah, it's Force of Will mana. Yep. So I was going to say it, but then I didn't want to spoil it. With the Force of Will, sometimes you're forced to pay that 5 mana to cast it from your hand. Well, this is kind of the same thing. You get to cast it for free, but then you're forced to pay the 5 mana later. So usually you're trying to use it to protect your own win, and it's free, and it doesn't matter because you're not going to see another upkeep. But there are those times where you got to use it to shut somebody down, and it feels real bad taking off a turn because you had to pay 5 mana, and then you can't do anything. But that doesn't mean it's not worth playing. It is a good counter spell. The only reason I didn't include it is because we already had 2 frees, so I didn't necessarily want the whole list to be counter spells.
The nice thing about this one being 0, if you flip it off Adnaz, you literally lose nothing, and there's no requirement. You don't have to have your commander in play. You don't have to have a blue card to pitch. You can just play it for free and run it out there. Agreed. It feels bad if you have to stop somebody's win using this and then time walk yourself by tapping out probably your next turn. But it's better than losing, and for protecting your win, it's hard to beat. There's not really much better if you're trying to protect your own win, other than maybe a silence.
True.
For Islane's choice, go ahead, Islane, what did you pick?
So, as I said, I didn't necessarily want to have 3 counter spells on the list, so I chose a different card, which is Intuition, and it's 2 and a blue. And it's search. You choose target opponents, and they get to pick between 3 cards that you tutor out of your library, which one goes in your hand, and the other 2 go in your graveyard. Usually, this is a win con. If you play this card in your list, you're playing it for the specific reason that it's built to have packages that win you the game, or if nothing else, it will go get 3 counter spells. So no matter what, you get a counter spell in your hand because you need it. Most of the time. My most common use for this has been go grab Savine's Reclamation, Underworld Breach, and your LED, and then no matter what they give you, you get your Breach combo. no matter how they've given it to you, once you've gotten your breach on the field, then you go ahead and cast the intuition again, and you go get your brain freeze with other cards that you don't care about, and regardless of where they put it, you still have your combo. I've done that in a couple lists. Otherwise, I've seen it with, like I said, going and getting piles of interaction. I have another list. Tivit goes and uses it to go and get Luris, Time Sieve, and one other recursive card that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, so that no matter what you do or what they give you, you can get the Time Sieve into your hand to go for your win. And I'm sure there's lots of other intuition piles out there for other decks that I'm not sure of, but very powerful card, being a one-card win con in some cases, usually with some setup involved, but still being the thing you can go get to win you the game. You can go get it with your Mystical Tutor, and people don't know what you're going to tutor for, they just know you're going to tutor. So maybe they don't counter it. Yeah, you probably should counter people's intuitions if you can, but yeah. I guess the one downside why you might put Pact over this is that Pact will be played in any deck in blue, whereas Intuition might not, because it's not always going to be a win con unless you build around it.
True. And the other thing that you can get blown out if you're not careful with Intuition, if you target a green player and they have Autumn's Veil or Veil of Summer in hand, because it does target, so you can get definitely blown out that way.
Yeah.
So just be careful of that. Don't target the green opponents, kiddos. Other than that, I mean, you're right. It's an unrestricted tutor. The downside of the modal part, not getting to pick what you get in hand, can be rough. If somebody gives you, the LED and you're putting your Savines and your Underworld Breach in the grave, and they cast, they drop the LED, they go for the Savines and they discard their hand, and then it gets countered or something and it gets blown out. It can feel bad, but
yeah,
it is, like you said, super powerful. I know the Glinthorn combo, like in
Malcolm.
What is that stupid Malcolm and the red black guy, the red black partner, will go do Malcolm the Vile Smasher. They'll go get some Animate Dead, Reanimate, Glinthorn type stuff with as another pile. I mean, there's tons of them that win with it. It is a one card win con for a lot of decks. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on this one. I'm willing to concede that Intuition being a win con versus just a protection of a win con, I'm okay with slamming Intuition on the list.
Sounds good to me, and I would say just to also not have 3 counter spells on the list, it's fine. That's not to say Pact Negation is better or worse than any of these. It definitely belongs on this list. It's just we got to narrow it to 5 somehow. Otherwise, we talk about every single good card and every single... I mean, maybe we'll do that at some point down the road where we just dedicate a whole episode to just the one color, and then we talk about all of the good things, but this has just been a kind of fun little thought experiment, so I like kind of having it limited. It also keeps the episodes from being 45 hours.
Fair enough.
So, moving on to the next color is black. And this is the first time that we have 2 that we didn't agree on, so we'll run through these first 3 real quick. As Kirk mentioned, you may see a pattern here. Our first one is Vampiric Tutor, which is part of that cycle with Enlightened Tutor and Mystical Tutor. This is the black version. This one is arguably better than both of them put together because it costs 1 black, and it will go get any card you want. It does not have to be revealed, so no one gets to know what it is. It does still go on top of your library, and the only other downside is that you lose 2 life. But nobody cares about the 2 life, and being able to tutor anything is great. Not giving away the information, also great. 90% of the time, people can guess what you're going for, because if it's early game, you're probably going for ramp, and if it's late game, you're probably going for a win con or some other form of interaction. But just like Demonic Tutor or any other tutor that we've talked about over the course of any of our discussions, it's black tutors are the best, and this is probably one of the best ones.
Yep. Nothing really to add on that one. I mean, like you said, the fact that you can get any cards, you don't have to reveal it, it's hidden information, is pretty nuts.
Indeed. And this is why black is the best at tutoring. Black is also kind of the best at card draw if you are considering this next one, which is Ad Nauseam. And probably needs no introduction because it is a format staple, has been for a number of years, but it's 5 mana, so it's 3 and 2 black, and it basically says reveal cards from the top of your library and take damage equal to their CMC until you feel like stopping. So 90% of the time, if you're running this in your list is designed to not only power into this very quickly, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 at the latest, you want to be casting this, and at that point you have such a low CMC of average in your deck that you can look through a large chunk of it. Now, granted, some decks are still going to be running Peer into the Abyss or Force of Will or some of the other cards we talked about that have higher CMCs, so there is that option or that chance sometimes that you're going to get hit with some of them, and I've seen it where maybe you get hit with 2 or 3 of them and you really have a really sad Nas or a bad Nas or whatever you want to call it, but most of the time this is just winning you the game because you're gonna rip through, you're gonna get free low-cost mana rocks, you're gonna drop those out, you're gonna have rituals, you're gonna go to where you're down to like, you know, under 10 life, and then you're gonna stop, you're gonna have a pile of cards, you're gonna look through them and you're gonna go, okay, play all my fast mana. Did I play a land drop? No. Okay, slam down a land. Next, I have these tutors and I have these combo pieces. Oh, I have this combo piece, but I don't have the other piece, so now I'm going to tutor for that. Then you cast both things, and hopefully you win. If you're in white, maybe you cast a Silence immediately and nobody can do anything about it, or you cast an Abolisher. If you're not in white, you're hoping you got some counterspell back up there to just do whatever you got to do, and that's really all there is to it. It is potentially a 1-card win con in lots of decks because it just goes and gets you everything you need to win the game. But sometimes you just kill yourself. You go down too low, you flip one more card and it puts you over and you just die on the spot. Or you just didn't really draw well with it and, you know, you're at a low life total, you don't have any blockers out, and people will just pick you off because they know you have all those good cards.
Yep. The other disadvantage, I suppose, of being an Adnaz, if you're playing Adnaz, you're playing black. If you're playing black, you're probably the target of the early aggression from the other players at the table. You know, if they're looking around saying, who do I attack with my whatever,
Crom.
They're probably pointing it your way. Right. Yeah, Crom's coming your way, Ragavan might be coming your way, etc. You know, you're going to be the death of 1,000 stings are coming your way as early, as quick as possible because they know they want to limit the amount of card draw you're going to get off of your game-breaking Adnaz. So, super powerful card.
If you want to stop that, you can level with people early and say, I don't play Adnaz, but they're still likely to go at you because you're probably playing at least something that utilizes your life. The only other time that you're going to be safe is if you are in a pod with multiple blacklists and maybe multiple Adnaz pilots, then people don't really know where to go and they just have to roll a dice or make a choice. But
yeah, threat assess as best they can and go in. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Adnaz is great. It does feel really bad when you go all in with a bunch of tutors and cast this and somehow it gets countered. Then you can be left pretty far behind. So there are certain decks like Cody, for instance, that I know it's a great deck, but if somebody can go through and like the 2 black and 1 tutor that exiles a card from an opponent's library, if they go steal your Adnaz out, sometimes your whole game plan can kind of crumble. So a lot of decks are really built around this card. It is insanely powerful, though, and it certainly belongs on any top 5 black instant list, period.
Absolutely. So the last one that we both agreed on was Dark Ritual. It's a very basic, been around since the game started. It's 1 black, but generates 3 black. So you use this usually to power out your commander early game, or to power out an Adnaz early game, or whatever the case may be, because it does give you 3 black pips all at once. If you, say, are in a multicolor deck, you only have 1 black pip, but you need 2 for Adnaz, or your commander, or whatever, you can get there with this. Similar to like Jeweled Lotus or whatever. It's a little ritual that will get you what you need. It also will straight up cast like Opposition Agent, and it's a great gotcha moment because it's an instant. You can have an Opposition Agent in your hand, and this in your hand, 1 black mana up. Somebody goes to tutor with their Vamp Tutor, and you go Dark Ritual into Opposition Agent, and now you steal their tutor, and that feels bad for them, but it feels real good for you.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of free fast mana or cheap fast mana that can be done after our Adnaz we just talked about. Dark Ritual is a huge piece of that, whether they're using it to power out the Adnaz or whether they're doing the old Chad Nauseam, casting it on their turn. They want to draw rituals, they want to draw Dark Ritual, etc. to create the large amount of mana they need to then finish their combo. Or like you said, you can early value out a commander or a stacks piece like Oppo. Just an all-around great card. If you're playing black and CEDH, I don't see a reason not to include this.
I mean, hell, you probably play this in other formats as well. I mean, it's good no matter where you're at to make extra mana. I know it's played in Pauper. I know it's played in. I'm sure it's probably played in other 60 card formats. I'm not really into those, but you play it in casual too, you know. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean it's part of some combos. Like I know I have it in, I think it's Yarok the Desecrator or something deck where I Kitten and Eternal Witness and Dark Ritual loops to create infinite black mana and then cast Asmodeus or what? Not Asmodeus. What's the Acererak, the little 3 mana 5/5 guy that goes to the dungeon forever. So yeah, you can use Dark Ritual to loop some stuff and create infinite black mana. And yeah, I mean, it's being a combo piece, being just fast mana, being value at all points. It's a great card.
And it's so innocuous too. That's what's great. And honestly, it is recognized though as being powerful enough that mental misplay or mental missteps and other things will come at this if it's the right time and they have it. Because people know if you're throwing down a ritual, you're probably powering out something a lot scarier than the ritual itself. But if they can stop it now, maybe you take some turns before you can get there.
Well, for sure. If I know they're on Adnaz and they're going, ritual with 2 other mana open, I'm firing off the mental misstep to try and stop it. Because after that Adnaz resolves, it's probably too late.
Yep. Okay, so then the last 2 we didn't agree on here, but ironically, we did pick 2 cards that are very similar, and I would argue could probably go in one slot together. We'll just say them. So Kirk picked Tainted Pact, and I picked Demonic Consultation. Now, I didn't put both because I figured one was good enough to represent, but I see why there's argument for both to be here, and I could see also why we might just put them both in the same category because they do essentially the same thing. So Demonic Consultation is 1 black, as opposed to Tainted Pact being 1 and a black. Demonic Consultation forces you to name a card and then flip the top 6 cards, and if it's in there, you then just exile your whole library, and usually that's bad. You probably just lose the game there. And that is the biggest downside to it. Whereas Tainted Pact is, you don't have to name anything, it does cost the 1 extra mana, but then you get to just flip cards until you want to stop, and you exile everything up until the card that you stop on, that one goes in your hand. Demonic Consultation is the same once you've found the named card, but you don't know where the named card is, so sometimes that can mean flipping your whole library to get this card that you needed, and then having lost all of your other win cons, you're now screwed. It can bite you in the ass, so I would argue Tainted Pact is safer, for sure. But yeah, it does cost the 1 more, and it does essentially the same thing, so I find that they're kind of... I put them on the same level. You usually are playing both if you're playing that strategy, so...
A lot of times true. And it holds true for, food chain decks or Thassa's Oracle decks. They're probably playing both. The upside to Tainted Pact being you can just fire it off. I mean, you have to craft your entire mana base around this card. You can't be playing multiples of the same base.
That's the other part of Tainted Pact that isn't the same on Consultation.
Yep. But you can just fire this off early as a much lower risk tutor if you need to find whatever you're looking for, interaction, etc., etc. It doesn't get mental misstepped if you're trying to go for the win with Thassa's Oracle. That's a very corner case scenario, but hey, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I can kind of see what you're saying there. They're very similar. They perform a similar function maybe 90% of the time, which is exile your library down to the last card or no cards, depending on if it's Tainted Pact or Demonic Consultation. Yeah. So a lot of times they will perform the same function. I would just say that, and again, Demonic Consultation, yeah, I fired it off looking for an answer if I need to stop somebody else from winning, and just hoped I didn't exile my win con in the top 6 or the card I was looking for and just lost on the spot. So they can be used very similarly, but I think Tainted Pact is slightly safer play.
It is for sure. It is for sure safer, but they're both almost exclusively used with Thassa's Oracle to win the game, and in that regard, they perform the same exact function. Because when you cast you don't have the risk of consult when you've already cast the Thassas, because you don't have to worry about naming anything that's actually in your deck. You name something that's not, so that it just goes, and you're fine. With Tainted Pact, it does have that extra added utility of just, okay, well, I'm going to tutor for an answer to see, but then you start going, and you're like, I'm looking for an answer, and then you get to your Thassas, and you're like, fuck, well, I have to stop, otherwise I exile my win con. So then now you just wasted your time and exiled a bunch of shit to get Thassas in your hand and not do anything. Or food chain, or whatever the case is, So I've had that bite me in the ass, too. Both of them have bit me in the ass. So, I mean, they're not perfect, but they are very powerful, and they do what you want them to do. And in that regard, I would put them on the same tier and kind of have our argument over the other 2 cards.
That's fair, but I'll throw one more piece of fire into this mix. And the reason that I do think Tainted Pact, especially now, which is weird, but especially now is slightly better, is because you can stop with 1 card or 2 cards left in your library, as opposed to Demonic Consultation. If you're doing the Thassa's Oracle win, you're all in. Well, there's so many cards now, that Fairy Mastermind just got printed that can force draws. Kenrith can force draws. if you have an Ethersworn or an Esper Sentinel on your own battlefield, or Crom, or Archivist of Ogma, there's a lot of ways that you can get just totally hosed by your own card. But otherwise, they're very similar.
Is true. And yeah, those kinds of things are probably going to continue to happen, and maybe at some point people will say, you know what, fuck Consultation, we're going to stick with just Pact. But I think in the current climate, even with all of those things you just mentioned, they don't happen that often. I've been blown out by Cephalid Coliseum once, ever. So, like, 90% of the time, that's never going to be a factor. I'm going to make the judgment here. We're just going to put them both on the same line because I think that they are close enough, despite their differences, that this other one is really the real argument here.
That's true. And plus, being a 1-drop versus 2-drop, yeah, there is no argument. Consultation is faster if you're going for the early win. So,
all right. So the last one is going to be my pick of Deadly Rollick versus Kirk's pick of Entomb. So Deadly Rollick, 3 and a black, and it is part of the same cycle as Fierce Guardianship, but it basically just says exile target creature an opponent controls. You can cast it for free if you control your commander. So yeah, 4 CMC to remove a creature at exile, terrible. If you could play Swords Plowshares, why the fuck would you ever play this? But you can't cast swords for free, and this you can. And you do have to have your commander out, of course. I don't think I've ever hard cast this because it's just, you're not leaving 4 mana up, so it's in your hand because you got your commander there. It's also one of the ones that isn't strictly played. Out of that cycle, Fierce Guardianship is played everywhere. I think the red version is as well. The green version, not played. The white version, not really played. It's like a fog and a indestructible thing or something. Like they're
the white one sees a tiny bit of play. The green one I've never seen cast. I couldn't even tell you what it's called.
If you were in a deck that was like Fog Tribal, sure, but I don't know why you would be playing that. Outside of like you're just in a heavy casual, you attack, you full swing every turn, and you have a bunch of fog so that people can't hurt you. I
mean, people love their darkness. Sorry, Islane.
That's fine. So obviously
that's a throwback. That's the throwback for cEDH game that Islane may or may not have got scummed on the darkness. Go on.
Yeah. You guys will see it eventually. So yeah, I mean, is it the best removal spell? No. It is one out of several black removal spells that can be free that are pretty good. And I think if you're in low color black decks, honestly, I play it in most of my black decks. So I just like having free removal. Sometimes it may be a consideration if you're on ad nauseam. Maybe you have too many other high CMC cards. You're running Bolsa Citadel and Pier, so you don't want an extra 4 hit on your life total, so you get rid of it. But is it universal? No, but we hadn't touched on any removal here, so I just I was trying to keep things balanced on these lists as far as like trying to show some representation of different instances and the things that they could do. So that was kind of my reasoning. Your pick is very good too. What does Entomb do?
It's 1 black mana instant. Search your library for any card, put it in your graveyard. No restrictions. So I mean, it's super enable. It's a million combos, or just reanimate decks, or whatever it is. There's just I can't think of a single black deck that doesn't have some kind of weird graveyard shenanigans off the top of my head. So this can just
I have black decks that don't run Animate Dead or whatever, but most of my black decks still run Reanimate because you could steal somebody's dockside or whatever big creature that you like. But Entomb, I don't think is universally played in black. And I'd say that's kind of the same argument with the Rollick being not universally played. It's played in any deck that is going to play Animate Dead or Reanimate or shenanigans with Entomb or Razaketh, pop them back out. You Entomb your World Gorger to pop it back out to win in a World Gorger deck, that kind of thing. You also might use it in some spell slingery type decks that have like Mizzix's Mastery or Breach or etc., where you might want to entomb a spell instead of a creature to then use the spell. You could entomb your Adnos and cast it for 4 with Mizzix's Mastery, so it does end up still costing you 5, but you could do it over the course of that guy's end step and your turn, so you save a mana. That mana might make the difference in you winning the game. Who knows? So it's got a lot of uses, but in both cases, they're not universal. You're not running this in every black deck, so I don't know. We've already got a Tutor, a WinCon, a Ritual, and then 2 more Tutor/WinCons. This is
the argument I would make. The argument I would make is in decks that play Ad Naz, you might still play Entomb. In decks that play Ad Naz, you're looking pretty hardcore at Deadly Rollick and saying, do I want to play this? So we're just thinking of power within black. I think Entomb is stronger. I mean, Necrotic Ooze is another card that exists in mono black or other decks that could play it and really utilize this to get a Kiki Jiki in the graveyard, for instance. So.
Well, and also the free opportunity on Rollick is, you know, most of your black commanders are going to see the field. So you're going to have it, but I think Entomb is more reliably going to be played because it's always only one black, whereas the other could cost you 4 as opposed to being free. And I mean, we can make that same argument with Fierce or Force or whatever, but like in those decks that it just doesn't happen. You always can play them pretty much. So I'll concede Entomb. Entomb makes the list.
Sweet.
So moving on, we're going to red. So what's the first one? Or it looks like we agreed on 4. So what were those?
Yep, so we've got Final Fortune, 2 red mana, instant. Take an extra turn after this one. At the end of that turn, you lose the game. Pretty amazing card.
There are, what, 2 other? I know there's Warrior's Oath.
There's 2 others that are both sorceries. This is the only one of them that's an instant, which is what makes it... Yeah, I mean, which is why it's on this list. Yeah, the other 2 are definitely sorceries.
It's the only one Warrior's I play, but I knew that there were other versions that do this.
Yep, and this one's just amazing. You can go off on unexpected in between your opponent's turns. You know, somebody taps out because they think you're not doing anything, and they're preparing for the next opponent. You can just surprise, boom, I'm taking the next turn and go for it. The lose the game clause, sure, it's not fun and it can suck. There are ways around it. Obviously, you can Angel's Grace and not lose. You can stifle it. You can
there's an artifact that
does or something, the creature that does it.
Too, yeah.
Yeah, so there are ways around it, but a lot of times you're doing this, you're in some kind of a, you cast your Ad Naz and you want to do this and then take the next turn, whatever it is.
This is played primarily in Naz decks. I play it in Naz decks where I didn't for a long time because I always thought, it's too risky, I'm going to die. But then the one time I did try it and I used it and won a game, it was like, oh, that was so satisfying because it was like, I had a really good Naz, I played out a bunch of stuff, and I was like, I can get there, but I need more time. You needed just a few more mana, or you needed whatever, and you're like, okay, well, I can discard this shit I don't care about. So you're just like, Final Fortune, clear your hand, draw, play out the rest of your win con or whatever, and go.
Yeah, think of all the instances you either have witnessed or been a part of yourself where somebody says, oh man, I would have won on my next turn.
One more mana.
Here's your next turn right here, 2 red mana instant. Have it. That's. Yep. I can't even begin to tell you the number of times where I've lost a game and I thought, yeah, dang it, next turn I was gonna go for the win, and somebody else would say, oh, next turn I had it if I had this. Boom. Here's your next turn, 2 red mana instant speed for crying out loud.
Yep. And it'll do the thing for sure.
It's kind of it's one of those. It's also a card if you get hit with it unexpected, it doesn't feel good to lose to, but you kind of don't feel so bad about it either. They're taking all the risk, they get all the reward, right?
Yeah. Because if you could stop them, they just lose.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on, next, we kind of slotted these 2 together. We can talk a little bit about the pros and cons of them, but Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, similarly, functionally the same, different cards, of course, and they do actually do different things. Red Elemental Blast, it's 1 red mana, instant, choose 1, counter target blue spell, or destroy target blue permanent. Pyroblast, it's the same 1 red mana instant. It's modal A, again, I believe it's... Well, you know what? I'm going to read it because it's been probably oracled. I don't want to mess up and have everybody get all mad at me. Here we go. Choose 1, counter target spell if it's blue, destroy target permanent if it's blue. So the 2 functional different causes for this, if someone Red Elemental Blast Displacer Kitten, bad example because they can probably play anything and blink it. They Red Elemental Blast Hullbreaker Horror. They can't Deflecting Swat it and change the target to a non-blue permanent. It has to target a blue permanent.
You also can't cast it unless it has a legal target.
Exactly.
Because it has to be blue. Whereas Pyroblast says just counter target blue thing. If it's not blue, you can still cast it. So like Krark and other decks like that don't really care, they're just doing it for a trigger, can just cast that and just keep going. And yeah, you're either bumping Storm Count, or in the case of Krark, you're getting more flips to do more things, and you don't care. Now, is that really something that comes up a lot? No. And are those getting swatted a lot? No. But it is a consideration. It's the reason why I actually picked Pyroblast, because that's an inherent sort of strength. and Kirk picked REB because of that other apparent strength. But in reality, they're so similar, and the pros and cons of each are so... You're running both of them in red most of the time. My thing is that if I am in a, like, say, an Is It deck, I'm probably not running both. I'm probably just running Pyro because I feel it's the better of the two, but that's, you know, basically just a personal opinion, and you can... Your mileage may vary, but 95% of the time you're running both of them because you're in red and white, and you just need the counters.
And it also does depend on deck composition. If you're playing Displacer Kitten, obviously Pyroblast is the better card because you can just run it out there and blink something with Kitten, or blink and protect your Kitten and not have to target your Kitten. So, absolutely. So we'll put them on the same line. They're functionally very the same. Very rarely does the corner case scenarios come up. They do come up. We're not saying they don't, but like you said, it's much more rare. Next on the list, back to the free cycle, we're going with Deflecting Swat. So Deflecting Swat, similar to Fierce Guardianship, 1 red and 2 colorless, free to cast if you control your commander. And it is you may choose new targets for target spell or ability. This is ridiculous. I mean, you can change a counter spell to target it, which then would fizzle it, but you can also just blow some. I got blown out. I cast a Fire Covenant trying to wipe my opponent's board. They cast this for free, and wow, that was a bad feel for me that day. Let me tell you. But just being able to change the targets for target spell or ability, pretty nutty.
It's a great protection spell. It's great offensively. The absolute top ceiling for this card is hitting a Peer into the Abyss. Somebody casts a Peer, they're gonna. If you're not familiar, Peer is like an 8 mana sorcery that says draw half your library, lose half your life. So if you're at 10, you go to 5. You've paid 5 life to draw half your library and 8 mana. That's fucking amazing.
I think it's only 7 mana, but it's still
7,
gross.
Whatever. It's expensive, but the point being, it says target player. So you obviously target yourself with that, and then they switch the target to themselves, and now they didn't have to pay all that mana, and they get to do the thing, and you get to sit there and cry. I've not had it happen to me, but I've seen it happen, and that's fucking depressing.
Yep, I've seen extra turn spells that target a player change the target to the other player. That one happens.
That's part of the ceiling as well. Otherwise, at its floor, it's stopping somebody from countering your thing, or you're interacting. A lot of the times, it's you're passing priority because you're red. So like a guy casts a thing, and then you're like, well, I'm in Boros, so I can't help. And then the next guy's in blue, and he casts a counterspell, and then the other guy's like, well, I still have a counterspell, and then you're like, okay, now I can help. I can Deflecting Swat his counterspell to this, and help the counterspell war that somebody else is having to make sure that you guys don't lose the game. And that's most likely where you're going to be using it, or you're going to be using it when they target your commander with a sword. You flip it around and target theirs, or some other problematic thing.
Yep, the big thing that I love and hate. I love the power creep on this card. I hate that Misdirection, kind of a similar card to Force of Will in blue, can change the target spell with a single target, whereas this one can change multiple targets. I think they really, really gave it a boost in power, being able to change multiple targets.
Arguably, though, I still think Misdirection is playable. It's just...
for sure.
It's just not as good, but it still sees play. I have it in a couple decks.
Yes, as do I. But I think this one is just... They made it so much more powerful. Being able to change multiple targets is just ridiculous.
It is in red. So it's, how often is that also getting the, outside of being a Grixis, most of the time, it's Boros or it's Gruul or something. So, like, they needed it. Whereas... Yeah,
they did.
Blue didn't really need it, but if you're in Grixis, you probably run this over Misdirection.
So I have a side question for our audience if they watch this and they want to tune in with a comment. Do you think Fierce Guardianship or Deflecting Swat is the more powerful card? I'm very curious to see people's thoughts on this.
I've never even tried to compare the two. I feel like they're ubiquitous in the sense of, like, they both see play if you're playing those colors, like, period.
Mm-hmm. They both are, but if you have one slot left in your deck and you can only fit in one or the other, which one you choose?
If I'm in Is It, I'm running both. If I'm in Grixis, I'm running both. I'm probably still running Relic too, but, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Last on our list that we agreed with in mono red is Abrade. 1 red, 1 colorless, instant. Choose one, deals 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. This is probably one we'll catch hell for. A lot of people don't love this spell nearly as much as you or I do, but they're wrong and I hate them. I'm just kidding. I love this card.
Yeah, like,
I absolutely love this card. Yeah, you can remove a Drannith Magistrate, you can remove an Abolisher, you can remove an Opposition Agent, you can remove a pesky artifact. I mean, come on, this card is great.
So I've already expressed how I'm a fan of modality. We just talked in the last set about that Into the Fire that had the modality of Self-Wheel or Pyroclasm. Like, this is basically the one that started it. Little history lesson. The OG of all of this is Lightning Bolt, right? 1 mana instant, deal 3 damage to target anything. Any target. This only hits creatures, so it doesn't do as good as Lightning Bolt, but generally you're not throwing 3 damage at somebody's face. You're usually throwing 3 damage at a creature. So arguably the same thing. It does cost 1 more, but that 1 extra mana gives you that modality. But over the course of the years, to fix Lightning Bolt, because it was arguably too strong, especially in 60 card where you could have 4 of, they switched to Shock, which was 1 mana for 2 damage. And then it's just, it's not the same, and you already have the access to this other one. Why would you even play that? And then they've just gone along throughout the years with a ton of variants of 1 mana red damage spells that do anywhere from 1 to 3 damage, but usually have some kind of clause. Like, some of them are like, there was one in Kaldheim where it was like, it does 2 damage. It's 1 mana. It does 2 damage unless you control 3 or more snow permanents. Then it does 3 damage. And then there's another one that does 2 damage. But then if you have Threshold, it does 3 damage. You know, those types of things. So they always had some kind of clause to fix it. Then they went this route. And I think this is the way to fix it. Like, making it less damage or making it have this weird thing to make it do more damage. Not really great.
Also, adding some of them are sorcery speed. Yeah, way worse.
That too. And adding a mana to it that's generic doesn't really feel too bad. 2 mana anything. Usually you're holding up 2 mana for counter spells and stuff. So interaction at 2 mana is pretty much the standard. 1 mana stuff is where it gets really premium, and that's where you argue over fucking slots. But in the 2 mana slot, this is perfect. It blows up. Honestly, red can't hit enchantments with anything. It can only remove creatures and it can only remove artifacts. So getting both, yes, I know there's edge cases, but just saying.
Wild Magic Surge is the only thing that comes to mind, but go on.
Or Chaos Warp, but...
Yeah, that too.
And Tibalt's Trickery, kinda. But yeah, not great. But yeah, I think adding the modality for 1 generic is great. And like you said, you can blow up any problematic artifact. If they've got an Isochron Scepter out, you blow it up. Staff of Domination, Wishclaw, I mean... yada yada. So it hits all kinds of great targets for creatures. It hits artifacts. You get to use it as you see fit. It's instant speed. What more can you ask for?
And the nice thing too with modal spells that they kind of fixed. Once you pick the mode as you cast it, even they can't change the target to, you know, if you cast this choosing the mode of destroy target artifact, Deflecting
Swat can only swat to an artifact. Yeah,
which is awesome. I mean, that's one little tiny fix that I do appreciate. So.
Indeed.
Moving on to the next. Here's the cards where we do not agree. Not that we don't think they're both powerful. It's just we disagreed on which one we thought belonged in the top 5. My pick, I put Divergent Transformations, 1 red and 6 instant. Obviously, look at our podcast. It's got Undaunted. This spell costs 1 colorless less to cast for each opponent. So typically it'll cost 3 colorless less. So you're looking at 1 red and 3 colorless. Exile 2 target creatures. For each of those creatures, its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card, puts that card onto the battlefield, shuffles the rest into his or her library. So you can go get 2 creatures in your deck. Typically, the 2 will win the game, whether it's Thassa's Oracle and Leveler, or Displacer Kitten and Atali, or whatever other crazy combo cards you come up with. I know I played against the deck that the Squeeze Knees plays that plays... Trinket Mage and Ariok Salvager is the Bomber Man, and boom, then they go get their LED and they have infinite mana and all other sorts of goofy stuff. So this is the one I picked. It's a weird red polymorph that can get 2 things and is usually game ending when it resolved.
I've also seen this done in Mardu to get Sire of Insanity and Turgid.
Yeah, there you go.
That's just fucking gross. But
talk about the feel bad, yeah.
I like it as a card. I used to play Paco Halden Divergent, and it did the Thassa's Leveler thing. And most of the time, if I could get there, it won. But a lot of the times, you were just getting your shit removed a lot because Paco's threatening and blah, blah, blah. I don't like it that much. Like, so the one that I picked is Delayed Blast Fireball, and it's arguably not the best card either. It's just been on my mind a lot lately because it's a newer card and I've been playing it in a lot of decks. It's 1 and 2 red. It's a Pyroclasm effect, does 2 damage to each creature. But then if it's cast from exile, because it has Foretell, I don't remember what the Foretell cost is. Well, it's 2 to Foretell it, but I think it's like 6 mana or something to cast it. It's kind of expensive. You're probably not doing that most of the time. It's usually just used as a Clasm. But in decks like Prosper, this can get exiled off the top, and then you can cast it for its normal cost. But it's being cast from exile, so you get the discount, and you still get to do the 5 damage to everything, so it can be a really big board wipe. The modality of it being able to go from a small board wipe to a bigger board wipe is pretty good. There's a lot of ways that it can end up being a 5 damage Clasm, which kills pretty much everything in cEDH outside of a few outliers. Granted, it does, miss some things like Sphinx or whatever, but
or big old hole breakers. Right. The argument for Divergent though is just exile 2 target creatures. You can cast it and are probably attempting to cast it to win the game, but there are times where you can run it out there to exile an opponent's creature if they're attempting to win with it.
True. Yeah, and I've seen that used too, even if it's just you're just a polymorph deck, but you have it in the deck anyway because you can go ahead and like I built that Baral Carry Zev deck to be polymorph because it can run the blue ones and the red ones. I chose not to put Divergent in there, but it was a consideration for a minute because you can just flip one of your cards out and then pop somebody else's. But they do get to do the search as well. So that could bite you in the ass depending on who it is, but especially if you're like trying to get rid of one of their stacks pieces that's going to stop you from doing anything else, like a Rule of Law creature, and then they just flip into another one. You're like, fuck, so it can backfire on you, but I think 90% of the time it's probably going to be fine. Maybe you flip a threat into like a mana dork and you're like, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, we've got removal on here already. We've got an extra turn, which is technically like win con-ish. Counters.
The other argument is we just expand Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast into 2 spots, and we call that the top 5 and leave these 2 off.
I'm almost willing to do that because I don't think Divergent really belongs here, and I would concede a delayed. God, I can't think of anything else. What are we?
I mean, Lightning Bolt in consideration because it can kill so many threats. However, you don't play it in a lot of 5-color decks sometimes.
It doesn't see a lot of play, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just go with the Divergent. I think it's seen more play overall to this point. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, but it is a potential win con on the spot, and for that, I guess it's better because a board wipe is good, but it's not probably winning you the game.
Fair enough. I mean, Red's real power, sometimes it comes in their crazy creatures, and maybe in other instances, this is just kind of an illustration of that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I think you are up next on green, buddy. What you got?
So this one, again, we agreed on 4 out of the 5. First one here is Crop Rotation. It's 1 green, sack a land as part of the cost, notably. So if you do sack that land and then you get a mental misstep, you're just out of land and your spell gets countered. But otherwise, you get to tutor up any land from your deck to the battlefield, untapped. This is almost 100% of the time used for Gaia's Cradle. But there are other edge cases. I know I run it in my Sithis list, which runs Gaia's Cradle and Sarah's Sanctum, which either one may be better given my board state. It also sometimes is used to go get like Boseiju because you need it for an answer, or the old Boseiju to make your Adnaz uncounterable, or even stuff like maybe a Wasteland or whatever to pull up something.
I've seen it go get like a Phyrexian Tower as a sack outlet for, if you're in a Hulk deck, or you mentioned it earlier, somebody, the rare, but every now and then the gotcha moment with the old Cephalid Coliseum, if somebody's going off with a Thoracle win. Yeah,
I mean, there's countless utility lands that this could go for, but again, most of the time it's in a green deck, so it's probably getting Gaia's Cradle because you're probably running a bunch of dorks, and this is just going to turn your mana base from like 5 or 6 to 8, 10, whatever. So very good card, does the thing you want it to do. Again, the biggest risk of blowout is if it gets countered after you've sacked your land, but even then you're only down a land and you're probably not too worse for wear. So Not just
agreed. Yeah, I think it's a super good card, and green tutors to the battlefield is pretty amazing, and they have quite a few. It's kind of frustrating. Wish more cards like red had them, but anyway, go on.
Right. Next one is pretty much the closest thing the greens got to a counterspell. They do have some actual counterspells, but they're very narrow. It's Veil of Summer. So this is one green, and it says that your permanents gain hexproof from blue and black. Your spells can't be targeted or countered by blue or black spells, and draw a card, I think.
If an opponent's cast a blue or black spell this turn, you draw a card also. Right. Yep, and it gives you hexproof from blue and black also, which, who knows, it could stop somebody from brain freezing you out. Yeah.
So, I mean, generally speaking, this is a card that you've cast something, somebody tries to counter it with a blue spell, obviously, and then you cast this, say, nope, and then you draw a card, and the rest of the turn they can't really fuck with you. Now, granted, anybody that's on REB or Pyroblast, they can still fuck with your stuff, but you're in green, so maybe they can't. Just depends on what other colors you might have, but generally speaking, this will stop people, and it can also be used as a pseudo silence if you're only concerned about the blue players being able to interact with your creature combo or whatever. You pop this off at the beginning just like you would a silence, and you don't get the card draw, but you get the protection and the hexproof, so maybe you just go off after this.
Yeah, and I've seen people cast this, end of turn if somebody's done a bunch of stuff and they're just so far behind, they're like, end of turn, cast Veil of Summer to draw a card. Yeah, I mean, that happens. And the stop the black removal thing, I mean, Deadly Rollick's great, as we've mentioned some other ones. There's a lot of great black removal, so protecting you from that's pretty good.
Yeah. And there is actually a couple, like, not counter, I think there's like at least one or two black spells. I think it's because there are some black spells that are specifically, they can counter green stuff. So that may be where the design space was to add black to that, because honestly, it could have just read hexproof from blue, and your shit can't be countered by blue, and they would have been just as playable. There's
that old black card. It's like 1 black and 1 that counters a creature spell, and they lose 3 life. I've cast that before. I love that card.
Yeah, or the green version. There's that enchantment. It's like Life Force or something, where it's like pay 2 green, counter target black spell.
Right.
They're enemy colors, and that's just kind of how it used to be way back in the day in the design space. But yeah, so this is basically just it's a counter spell, protection spell, a pseudo silence. It has a multitude of uses, but it's the best version. Prior to this, there was Autumn's Veil that basically did the same thing, but it didn't have the hexproof clause, and it didn't have the draw card clause, so not as good. But in some cases, especially mono green, you play both. Either way. Next one is another part of that series of tutors, and this one's the green version. It's Worldly Tutor. It's 1 green, search your library for a creature and put it on top, or reveal it, put it on top, shuffle. So same thing, you're going to tutor for a creature. People are going to know what it is. You're going to put it on top. You're probably doing this on end step, so you draw it. You may do it in your upkeep, so you draw it. You may do it during your turn just to have it for later, or you may be able to draw again, whatever. One of the best creature tutors as far as cost, and no restrictions. It does suck that it doesn't go to the field, or that it doesn't go to your hand. So in that regard, it kind of sucks, as opposed to a lot of the other green tutors that will put it to field. But it is the OG. It is the cheapest, and it's still playable. It's in pretty much every green deck, unless you're in black and you're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna run all the black tutors. But even then, you're probably still running this one.
Yeah, and there are corner cases where putting it on top of the library with being a creature can actually be a good thing. If you're like on the conspicuous Snoop lines and you've got Snoop in play, and you can go tutor Kiki Jiki and put him on top of the library and activate your Snoop a ton of times and kill somebody if you have an impact tremors or whatever it is. So there are times where putting a creature on top of your library can be a weird benefit, as the other ones.
There are some weird cards that are like, what's one of them? That one vampire from Ixalan, where it was like reveal top card of your library, and it deals damage equal to its CMC to everybody. There's some weird edge cases like that too, where putting it on top may be worthwhile.
And green at least does have the advantage of it's got several creatures and planeswalkers that'll let you cast the top card of your library if it's a creature. So it does have a little bit of help in that support as well. Great card.
Vivian Planeswalker that does that. There's a few others.
There's at least 2 green creatures that do it. There's probably a ton more, but yeah, 2 that I've seen recently. So
And then the last one we agreed on was Chord of Calling, which is another creature tutor, but this one does go to the battlefield. It's 3 green and X, but also has Convoke, which means that you can tap your creatures to pay for those X mana. So you tap out for whatever CMC you need, and you search your battlefield, you put it on the battlefield. I'm sorry, you search your library, you grab the card, put it on the battlefield. So, say you need a Collector Oof, you pay 3 green and 2, or you tap 2 creatures, you get your Collector Oof on the field, stops everybody's artifact shenanigans, and you feel good about life. If you need something bigger, you get something bigger. I play it in decks where, you know, you have a multitude of answers, or creatures that are answers themselves, so that you can just go, or they're combo pieces, so you just go and tutor and get your combo piece on the field and then just go to town. You know, this can be used, it's expensive, but you could use this to just put a Protean Hulk on the field, and if you already got a sack outlet, you just go to town.
Yep, absolutely. And the fact that you can convoke it, you know, each creature you tap while casting it reduces it by 1, or that creature's color is pretty nuts. I mean, yeah, green, obviously you're going to be probably playing a lot of mana dorks, so that's not going to be as relevant, but you could tap your Boreal Druid for green instead of colorless if you're playing this, which is kind of nice. But yeah, just instant speed straight to the battlefield. It's terrifying.
Yeah, you can also use your commander or whatever. And in some cases, especially if it's something expensive you're going for, you are going to tap some of your mana and maybe leave some of your mana up and tap your creatures instead. So if this comes out, you still have a blocker, but then you have other mana to do things with. So yeah, it's one of the more powerful ones. There are a few others that do the same sort of effect, but a lot of them are limited to green, like Green Sun Zenith, for instance. It's 1 green and X, you pay that much, you go get that creature, you put it on the battlefield, but then it has to be green, and that can sometimes be a limitation. Or Natural Order, where you have to sack a green creature to get a green creature. Sometimes that just doesn't work. So this one is the most versatile, I'd say.
And the biggest downside to all those versus this is this one is the instant, which makes it so scary.
As well, yes. So you can do this on somebody's end step just to get your thing out and then go ham.
Heck yeah.
So coming to the 5th choice, this is where we disagreed. And honestly, the one that Kirk picked is one that I had considered. I just ended up not putting. So his was Noxious Revival, which is 1 green Phyrexian. So you can pay a green mana or you can pay 2 life. And then you just pick a target spell in a graveyard or card in a graveyard, put it on top of that owner's library. So it doesn't have to be your graveyard. And in that regard, this has both uses for yourself and like offensive uses against other players, because if they're trying to, say, reanimate a Razaketh from their graveyard, you cast this and put it on top of their library. Now that spell fizzles, and now they're going to draw Razaketh, and maybe they can't cast it. So pretty good. Otherwise, you're usually using this to put your own stuff on top of your library to then use again at somebody's end step or whatever the case is.
Yep, exactly. Just the ability to be modal kind of in that way. It's super powerful. Being able to Phyrexian mana anything for just 2 life is pretty nutty. So this one's definitely...
It's essentially free.
It's essentially free, which is why I think it's on the list. The one I know you chose was, Force of Vigor, 2 green and 2 colorless, destroy 2 target instants, up to 2, right? Is it up to 2?
It's up to 2 artifacts and enchantments.
Yeah, artifacts and enchantments. And if it's an opponent's turn, you can cast it for free by exiling a green card from your hand.
Yeah.
So super powerful, obviously, for removing multiple stacks pieces or problematic permanents. Instant speed, free by pitching a green card. Super powerful. I would argue Noxious Revival is more or less free also, so they're kind of at a draw at that point. I mean, 2 life versus ditching a card. I'd much rather pay 2 life.
Yes.
But removal versus just buyback type effect. I don't know. This one's close for me.
Also, green has a lot of other options for recursion. You know, they've got Ewit, and then there's the second Ewit that they printed a while back.
Yeah,
and then,
Timeless Witness or something.
Yeah, and there's a few other ways that they can put permanents back on top of your library to get them back or to put them back in your hand. This is the cheapest one. This is the only one that I know I can think of that's instant speed. Although there may be other. I think the other ones are like.
There's a 1 green mana non-Phyrexian one that does it. Reclaim, I want to say, is what it's called. That does the same kind of thing. Maybe man, it might be. I haven't looked at it in a hot minute.
Yeah,
ever since Noxious Revival's been printed, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, there's Reclaim, and then there's that one that was the MDFC that was a tap land on one side, and the other side was kind of an Ewit effect.
Yeah, like regrowth.
There's a lot of them, but Noxious is definitely the best out of them, I think, in that regard. Force is also a really good... So I also thought about Nature's Claim, because Nature's Claim is just 1 green, blow up an artifact or enchantment. Yeah, they gain 4 life, but who cares? You got rid of the thing that's stopping you. And it's very cheap, very powerful. This one I like, though, because it can be free. Pitching a card, yeah, sucks, but I mean, you got Sylvan Library and stuff. You're probably drawing. I mean, it's green. You're drawing cards, so you're probably fine. Pitching the card probably doesn't hurt that bad. The only time it does suck is if you're on this in like a 3-color deck and you just don't have the green card and you got to pay the 4 mana. In that regard, 4 mana to blow up 2 things, not great, not a great rate, but it was only here because of that free clause, and it's a card that I play in quite a few decks because it gets rid of 2 things. It can be 2 things on one guy's board. It can be 1 thing on 2 different people's boards. It can be an artifact and an enchantment, or 2 enchantments, 2 artifacts. You know, there's a lot there going for it. In terms of raw power, I think Force is probably better, but they both have their edge cases where either one could be better than the other. So I don't really know what to go with here.
The argument I would make is I think you'll play Noxious Revival in 5-color decks. I don't think you're playing Force of Vigor in 5-color decks. The other downside to it with Force of Vigor, the green card clause does hurt it in a weird way in that a lot of green's strength is its early mana dorks. So a lot of times you're dumping your hand quicker with green because you're casting all your little green permanents versus like a blue counterspell one where, or Force of Will or whatever, where you're holding Interaction, which is blue's, cream of the crop, and that's all stuff in your hands. You're likely to have blue cards in hand more often than green cards in hand. My opinion there. I mean, and like you said, survival of the fittest and stuff like that. Sure, or a Sylvan Library. There's ways to fill your hand. No argument against that. I would just say I think you'll play Noxious Revival in 4-color and 5-color decks. I don't know that you're going to play Force of Vigor in those.
All right, I'll give you that one.
I'll take it.
So yeah, I guess then we move on to gold. You want to start us off there?
Absolutely. So gold, we'll start off. We had 3 that we agreed with. Fire Covenant, first one, and I'll read it so I don't goof it. 1 red, 1 black, and 1 colorless instant. As an additional cost to cast it, pay X life. It deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. So it's a super one-sided board wrath, instant speed type effect in red and black. What more is there to say? I absolutely love this card. It got printed way back, and I think Ice Age, if I remember right, and I've probably been slaving it up ever since. Plus, the artwork's amazing. This is a side note.
So
but yeah.
I've kind of gone back and forth with it. I used it for a while, then I kind of stopped using it, and I'm back on using it more often than not now, because especially in Rakdos decks, because it's just, yes, you have to pay the life, which sucks if you're also trying to do Adnos stuff, but I have some Rakdos lists that are like Doomsday and not Adnos, so it's fine. I don't really care about my life as much. And then instant speed on somebody's end step, you just blow up a bunch of shit because then you can go off. It's pretty good. Also, like you said, it doesn't affect you at all except for your life total. So that's a really high selling point. And yes, black has other things like Damnation or whatever, but that also hits your own board.
Toxic Deluge and all that. Yeah.
There are other cards that maybe you play with this or play in lieu of, but I still think that this is, if you're in Rakdos Plus, I think this is still worthwhile. The only time maybe it switches is if you're in white, because maybe you're playing Winds of Abandon instead, or if you're in blue, you're playing Cyclonic Rift instead. But like Rakdos decks, just by themselves, they should be playing this. They're probably playing Deluge as well. That's probably where I'd be at. If I'm in white or like Mardu, maybe I'm playing Dam as well because of the modality there. But yeah, I like Fire Covenant because it's not the board wipe where you're like, oh shit, I'm behind, wipe everything. It's more of a, I'm going to get rid of the things that are hurting me and still maintain my board. And for that, it's really good.
Yep. Number 2 on the list, we have Assassin's Trophy. I always get this one and the other one confused. I think this is what's 1 green, 1 black instant, destroy any target permanent. Is it a permanent your opponent's control? Ugh, that one I'm going to have to look up because I can never remember. I've never pointed at my own permanent. Not to say it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I've never done that either.
Okay. If I could type, we'd be in business. So, yep, destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle.
Just so same thing as Path to Exile. It's got the same downside, but in this case, it hits any permanent. It does cost 2 mana, but it can hit lands. So you can blow up a Gaia's Cradle with this and then give them a basic, which is a fair trade.
Yep, love this card. And just being able to answer any permanent on the battlefield at instant speed is huge. Every Jund deck should play this. End of story.
And Golgari. It's also probably arguably seeing play in 5-color decks because it's just versatile removal for 2 mana.
Absolutely.
Anytime you can hit anything, I think it's worthwhile.
And especially, like you said, as mana bases get greedier, the search for basic is either going to be less likely to happen or less impactful. So after Assassin's Trophy, we have Abrupt Decay, which is a very similar card. 1 black and 1 green, instant, can't be countered by spells or abilities. Destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. In cEDH, that's not going to hit some commanders. It's not going to hit some, big game-breaking spells or permanents, that is, but it's going to hit the vast majority of them. And being an uncounterable spell, pretty nuts.
I mean, it is essentially... It was around before Assassin's Trophy. It's essentially Assassin's Trophy, just has a limitation, but can't be countered, so... it's not going to blow up some of your commanders and things that are going to be higher CMC or bigger.
Bolus's Citadel or something.
Right, but it's gonna blow up a vast majority of the things that are out there. It's still instant speed. It can't be countered, which is huge. Not really a whole lot else to say about it.
Yep, fair enough. Next on the list, we have Eladamri's Call. 1 green, 1 white, instant. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. 1 green, 1 white, tutor for any creature you want straight to your hand. Pretty powerful. It's not on top of the library like a lot of the other tutors or the Worldly Tutor we talked about earlier. It just goes straight to hand. The downside being Selesnya. Obviously, there's only certain decks you can run it in. The upside being straight to the hand. You can go tutor whatever you need and probably cast your Dockside the same turn or whatever, or your Thassa's Oracle or whatever you're tutoring for.
It's arguably as good as like a Worldly Tutor because it's still revealed information, but instead of top of library, it's going in your hand. It costs 1 more mana, but I mean, if you're in a creature heavy, green deck or Selesnya deck, like this is a slam dunk. If you're in, anything else, Bance or whatever that's in these colors, you're probably going to play this because it's just as good. That's really all there is to say about it. It goes to hand. That's great. Most of the creature tutors are either top of library or to the battlefield. This one is, I think, the only one that goes to hand.
Yeah, there's some creatures that tutor to hand, but yeah, nothing I can think of instants or sorceries. I'm sure they exist, but nothing comes to mind.
Yeah. Either way, I think this one is definitely worth... it was one that I didn't think of off the top, but we ended up putting on here anyway because it is worth a slot. And then the last slot, we kind of both had a couple different thoughts about what was going to go in there. I had picked Dovin's Veto and Wear Tear. Dovin's Veto is a Azorius, so it's white and a blue. Counter target non-creature spell, but can't be countered. And I think that's the only reason it's okay is because it is a 2-mana counter anything, or counter non-creature, but which is basically anything you're going to want to counter. But it just stops the counter spell war in its tracks because it can't be fucked with. In that regard, it's pretty good. Is it the best counterspell out there? No. Do I run it in some decks? Yes. But if I'm in blue, most of the time I'm running other things. So it was just one of the first ones that came to mind that was multicolor. Wear Tear, also not necessarily the best thing in the world, but Boros decks love it because you can hit an enchantment and a artifact, or either or. For, what is it? 1 red, white? Something like that?
I can never remember. Yeah, I think it's 1 red and a colorless or a white mana. Sounds right. Yeah, it's great. And again, being modal, we've talked about how much we love modal spells, just having the power. And this one, similar to, like you said, Force of Vigor, it can nuke 2 things if you need to. Unfortunately, it can only do 1 artifact and 1 enchantment. It can be 2 of one or 2 of the other, but it is pretty powerful. And being able to 1 white mana destroy target Rhystic Study feels pretty amazing. No lie there.
Indeed. And then you had a couple that you were thinking about.
Yeah, the 2 I was kind of going back and forth on. So Vanishing Verse, it is 1 black and 1 white instant. To exile target monocolored permanent, I believe is how it reads. Let me just make sure. Again, it's late in the day. Yep, exile target monocolored permanent. 1 white and 1 black instant. Can't hit a lot of commanders because obviously a lot of commanders are multicolor. I mean, there's exceptions besides being monocolored decks. There's partners that are just 1 color, etc., etc. But a lot of times this will either hit a super important piece. It can hit certain commanders, or it can be a dead card in your hand. hard to say. The other one I had kind of put on there as a consideration would be Limdul's Vault. And that's 1 black, 1 blue instant. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. As many times as you choose, you may pay 1 life. Put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order. Then look at the top 5 cards of your library. At the very end of it, you shuffle your library and put the last cards you looked at this way on top of it in any order. So you keep going through your library till you want to stop. Those 5, set them aside, shuffle. Then those 5 go on top in any order you want. 1 black, 1 blue instant.
It basically tutors whatever you want, but it can cost you a lot of life, and is one of the most painful things to sit through as an opponent.
Fact.
It's not so bad if somebody goes for the first, within the first couple tries, but I've seen people go through like 3/4 of their library, and you're just sitting there like, okay, they're paying 15 life, and they got the cards they wanted, but I sat here for a half hour while they figured it out. Right. I almost want that off the list for this reason, but it is powerful. I'm willing to concede Dovin's Veto probably doesn't belong. It was just one of the first ones I thought of. I also would argue that Vanishing Verse is not good enough. Yes, most creatures are mono-colored, so it does hit a good percentage, but like, it's Orzhov, and like, just sure, if you're in an Orzhov deck, probably you run this, but otherwise, there's going to be better options.
Yeah, the problem with it not being able to hit artifacts if they're colorless artifacts is a little rough too. So yep, I'm willing to say I agreed on Dovin's Veto. Used to be better. It's gotten worse as they printed more and more better counterspells, an Alpha You Can't Refuse, etc. Right. Again, with Vanishing Verse, I think there probably are more versatile and better removal spells. I'm playing the March of the White March we talked about over this all day and twice on Sundays. Right. So it's kind of down to whether you think it's Limdul's Vault or Wear and Tear. Again, because of the hatred I have for sitting through somebody go through Limdul's Vault, we'll go with Wear and Tear and call it a day.
I think I agree there too. Wear and Tear is also, like we were saying before, like red doesn't have the option to get rid of enchantments. If it's a Boros deck or red, white plus, this now gives you the option to blow up enchantments that may be problematic. And then also, just like you said, the modality of it, you don't have to pay the full amount. You can just pay half of it and pay one side. You can pay the other half of it and play one side. And then if you have the mana, you play both, and you blow up 2 different things, and that's pretty good. Anytime you can pay 3 or less mana to blow up multiple targets, it's a pretty good value.
Yeah, being a 2-for-1, whereas Limdul's Vault is you go down in card advantage because you don't replace it in your hand. So I'm good with that choice.
All right. Well, it sounds like we got it taken care of. So this is what we think the quote-unquote best 5 instants are in each of the colors and the color pairings, etc. Again, not an exhaustive list, and obviously there were cards that we're talking about that could very easily have gone on the list that we just made a choice. So your mileage may vary, but we definitely would like to hear in the comments if we missed anything that was obvious, if you disagree for whatever reason, and also Kirk's question of the week, which I already forgot, but I'm sure you heard it more recently than I did, so we'll for sure shout you out and talk about your responses if you do.
It's appreciated, everyone.
So with that, we will be signing off here. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks with the next in this series, and I don't know which one that's going to be, but you'll know as soon as we figure it out.
All right, take care, everyone.
See you guys.